Welcome to CMO Huddles Studio, the live streaming show dedicated to inspiring B2B greatness. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, live from my home studio in New York City. Welcome to today's episode, the Introverted CMO. Did you notice how I just started talking softer? Because we're talking introverts here, where we challenge the prevalent misconception that success in marketing leadership positions are reserved for the extroverted. Instead, we dive into a compelling exploration of CMOs who proudly identify with their I as an introverted, seeing their temperament not as a comparative weakness, but as a defining strength. So whether you're an introverted marketer looking for inspiration or have staffers who share this trait, join us in unveiling strategies for navigating the often noisy marketing arena and discover the underestimated power of introversion in the world of B2B marketing. And with that, let's bring on Bill Strawderman, CMO of GS1 US, and a returning guest who previously appeared on the show to discuss brand refresh and leadership. Hello, Bill. How are you and where are you?
Hello, Drew. Good to see you again. I am in Ewing, New Jersey, which is sandwiched between the city of brotherly love and Gotham City.
There we go. All right. So I guess that puts you in the sort of Phillies, Eagles
We're in
kind of.
Central Jersey. Yeah, Central New Jersey.
All right. All right. Well, so this show was actually your idea, and it started with you saying you indexed high on Myers-Briggs. So let's talk about how you feel about introversion and how it shaped your leadership style as a CMO.
Okay, yeah. It's funny. In the Myers-Briggs, I'm kind of an INTJ, which is, as I understand it, the architect. So you kind of blend a couple of different personality variables there. The things that I would say are kind of more central to how I am, an introvert is really the internal processing world. There's a lot that goes on, I think, behind the scenes in my mind, and the comfort that comes with familiarity, familiar places, familiar people, familiar crowds, those types of things. Those are the two primary things.
And so internal processing, it's funny because I, did some research on this, and one of the strengths of an introvert is, in theory, deep thinking. So that seems like what internal processing is about. It's right, going into a subject and getting there deep, and not necessarily taking either the first thing you see, but really pushing yourself to find, find the insight.
Yeah, I think that's right, Drew. I mean, I would say that using quiet and listening as kind of an advantage is great because, there's a lot that goes on around you and you have to be able to separate signal from noise. And so part of that internal processing, I think, and extroverts may do that as well, but, maybe more commonly, there's a little bit more of that external processing that goes on. And that's that thinking that's happening in real time and verbally. I tend to kind of put it into the background and let it run for a while. I also tend to think that when I say something, I'm trying to speak for impact. I guess I come from a line of educators, and I have kind of this desire to teach and grow others. So it's probably just sort of part of the composition of me and my upbringing.
Well, I want to break down a few of the things you said. One of the things you said was using quiet. And I know for extroverts like myself, quiet is like scary. And you had to actually train yourself to not fill it sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a really interesting thing. And using quiet, it's funny, it's in negotiation books, you hear it a lot, is you don't have to respond right away. You can listen. And I know there are a number of it was in, they talked about that in the book, and Tim Cook has that special strength of using quiet. So
Yeah.
that was interesting. The second thing you mentioned was listening. And gosh, that seems like a skill that is completely gone by the wayside. I'm just curious, as you were listening, I mean, what an extrovert does is they listen while they're figuring out what they're going to say. An
Yeah.
introvert listens. So I don't know if there's a question there or not, but I'm just curious. In as you think about that, and you watch in a room full of executives, and you're the interview, actually listening and processing, do you find yourself being able to take advantage of that?
I think so because at the end of the day, you're really trying to do synthesis, and that you want to find a point where I think you're going to provide value into the conversation. And that's not to say, by contrast, that extroverts are not. It's just I think for me, it comes back to this question of I'd really like to provide a meaningful contribution if I can, and that doesn't necessarily mean I have to have a point of view on everything. It's like, I can sit back and say, that maybe this isn't a place where I can actually add some distinct value. So you have to look for the opportunities and listen for them.
And I'm wondering if you could share a moment in your career where being an introvert has proven to be sort of an unexpected advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say is that I sort of was not always introverted, believe it or not. I think I was a little bit of a class clown growing up. I kind of had a little bit more of a shoot from the hip approach to coming to conclusions. And I think, and I'll reflect on this, I think, a little bit later, is that I had an executive coach as a byproduct of a mentor of mine saying, like, dude, you know, you're not very easy to get along with. You're kind of like, people think you're smart, but you're kind of misdirected in terms of how you're engaging others and trying to kind of really figure out the difference between being right and adding value or getting to a great answer. And so that through that coaching, I just sort of learned to step back to actually take stock of the environment, and then and kind of use that more in a way that's engaging and enrolling.
Wow, boy, I sure wish I had your coach 25 years ago. Um, yeah, uh, interesting. So you actually developed a sense of introversion to sort of help sort of find balance.
I
Uh,
think so.
and what's interesting, and you also said, I just make a point about that, is that extroverts, and I know this for myself, and I have to watch it, are tend to be able to look at a situation and make a quick decision. And obviously, making a decision is important. And sometimes just making a decision is the right decision, as opposed to trying to get it perfect. But I'm sure you're seeing circumstances where an extrovert in front of you is just boom, okay, let's do that. And sometimes that happens to be the CEO, but if they're so inclined. And you must struggle with it at this point and say, well, shouldn't we be thinking this through?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's sort of this fine line between being quick on your feet, which I don't think I'm slow on my feet, hopefully, and kind of really sort of figuring out in more game theorying, is this the right approach? Is this the wise approach? Sometimes fast moving is fast moving, and you've got to go with the flow. But your default, it's kind of like the way to sort of think about it is this is a continuum, and you have to have the ability to span the poles. So I think all of us to some extent have introverted tendencies and extroverted tendencies. It's a question of, like, situationally, how do you pull them out at the right time, and not overuse one to your detriment.
Yeah, and as I'm thinking about this, we use the title in this show self-awareness, and I feel like that's such a powerful characteristic. Yet we know people who aren't self-aware. We might work with them all the time, and so it sort of, this is an interesting journey that you've been on, extrovert to introvert, recognizing that you can't always just rely on that one characteristic. I think that's really interesting. Another characteristic, and I'm curious, of introverts is, they do not like networking, but they are really good at building deep relationships. And I'm just curious if that, and it applies to you, and again, how that impacts your approach to those two areas.
Yeah, I think 100%. I am probably self-described as an awkward networker, and it comes back to kind of the question of, like, comfort with familiarity, and the preference for kind of smaller, tighter, deeper circles. So the funny thing about that is that in order to get into a circle to begin with, you have to take a step, right? You have to be willing to kind of figure out a strategy to kind of break through. I say, like, for me, it's one of those lifelong development things that is a challenge.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Is it what?
It's a challenge for me to kind of go into sort of like a big sea of people that I don't know and sort of say, how am I going to kind of, fit in, create value, start a conversation, those types of things. Definitely, I would say on the introversion scale, that's still kind of a big personal development challenge.
And I think even extroverts struggle with that. I think about the time you go to a conference, you're there solo, there's no wingman and so forth. And one of the ideas that I read recently on that is, which is so smart, is when you check in with the organizer and you say, hey, is there somebody here I should talk to? And they sort of they point you somewhere, because all you need is that icebreaker, because you are a good listener and you are likely to go deep, and maybe that then you sort of develop a deep relationship with an individual, and that's a success. So, all right, well, look, great stuff. We'll be back to Bill. Now we're going to bring on Julie Kaplan, CMO of CareMetx, and an industry expert who has graced her stage before to delve into the topic of culture wins and the first 90 days. And she is November's Huddler of the Month. All right. Well, hello, Julie. Wonderful to see you again. How are
Thanks
you
for
and
having me
where
back.
are you?
Oh, I'm great. I am in Maryland, where we are in full on fall season.
Yeah, fall season is right. It was 34 degrees here in New York City this morning, a little bit brisk. Maybe we'll have a winter this year. We'll see. So, all right. So let's talk about introversion and how that's influenced your career and leadership style.
Right. So, a lot of people mistake or use the term shy and introverted interchangeably. And I would say that's not the case for me. I am not shy. I am quiet. Um, and much of what Bill said earlier could apply to me as well. I tend to reflect. I tend to listen more than talk. And all of these qualities have shaped my style, who I am fundamentally, and by extension, how I lead and how I coach other people.
And so, okay, so we're a great point about shy and introverted and the distinctions. Can you talk about given that you're a better listener in theory than an extrovert,
I don't know better,
but a good listener, right? And maybe even a trained listener, talk about a circumstance where that really helped you. And it's funny because I can think of situations myself where I actually took a beat and I listened a little bit more, and maybe I asked another question and we got to a different place than I had expected with the first initial response. So I'm just curious, in your work life, where that listening skill and ability to reflect before you jump in has paid out.
A couple of places, but the thing that jumps to mind at the moment is, there's a lot of people right now in the world and in the workplace feeling unseen, unheard, isolated. These are words I hear a lot. And when you listen first before talking, you are much more likely to have the person on the other end of the conversation feel seen, feel heard. And we know that that is a step in the right direction of helping people feel less isolated in the workplace, especially in a virtual world, and especially in a world where there's a lot going on outside and inside the company. That's the one that comes to mind first.
Yeah, it is a challenging time, and it feels like because of work from home, that disconnection is only going to get worse. And I worry for introverts because they won't necessarily say, I'm feeling unseen, unheard, or isolated. They'll just let it happen. And to some extent, they may even think, oh, this is good for me. I kind of like being it. But it's not necessarily. So as a leader, and also being aware of what an introvert needs. How do you then engage other than listening? I mean, and there's all sorts of kinds of listening. If you anything you've done of late, in particular, in the last 3 years, that you feel has sort of helped, you know, cut through to another introvert, perhaps?
Well, what I would say is I have stepped up the one-on-ones, which applies both to my extroverted and introverted colleagues, but I learn a lot more from that. And I think you just have to do a lot more one-on-ones in a virtual workplace, because you're not going to accidentally, have important conversation at the water cooler. So you have to create a space for that. The advantage for introverts is when you have a one-on-one conversation, they're not considering the other people in the conversation. They can limit the interaction to one-to-one. And that allows you to bring a little bit more of what they might be concerned about. And then there's a series of, questions that I like to ask that tend to be open-ended and maybe not commonplace, like that help me understand what they might be going through. Things like questions like, tell me your challenges, or tell me what you feel was a win. Tell me what you were disappointed in this week. And that might help bring out some of the things that they're concerned about that they might not have, if you said, what are your concerns?
Right.
They might not have answered that question.
And it's funny that they're great questions, and they are not necessarily the way an extrovert would phrase the question. I'm thinking now of managing up, and let's say you're reporting to an extrovert who wouldn't think to ask a question like, can you train them? Because it's like, it's the care and feeding of, a Chia pet. If you want to get the most out of an introverted CMO, these are the questions that you need to ask. I'm just curious how that works.
I really have not given much thought to how to train extroverts, but it sounds like a great book. But no, I haven't, sort of managed up in that way. It's much more really a way from, look, a lot of what I do and a lot of the conversations I have and a lot of the quiet and reflection time that I use is about understanding my world, right? So I'm getting inputs and I'm processing them. And I think Bill said it, well, you're trying to differentiate between signals and noise, and you're getting a lot of both all at once. So finding ways to limit the inputs is one way to do that.
Right, because you have the ability to sort of focus and zero in and really pay, whereas extrovert might also tend more towards, hey, look, a squirrel, which is should be, again, a competitive advantage. Lastly, sort of before we move on, I just want to, so in general, introverts tend to be better writers, goes back to what you were talking about, it being more reflective, really thinking things through. And then I sort of went, well, gee, would that mean that you'd be more likely to send an email than you would present when presenting would be? So do you lean into your writing skills a little more than you might your presenting skills?
Yeah, I used to. I do that less now than I used to. I used to sort of think it all through and type it up in an email. And you can't engage in a conversation in an email or through those means of communications. There are great times to use that. Like, for example, a great time to do the writing is after a meeting and using that time, quiet, alone time, to sort out all of the things that you heard in a meeting and recap it, either for everyone or just yourself. That is a great tool that you can use. It's important not to use the tools in an unproductive way, and engaging in long, essays that an extrovert stops at word 3
Right.
is just not a great use of time. And not productive.
Well, and it's sort of an issue of understanding versus persuasion. I mean, I think what writing, and I used to say, if you can't write it well, you don't understand it. And so writing is a really great way to sort of synthesize and understand what it is, the challenge you're facing, but it's not necessarily persuasive. And so we just need to think about the differences. Okay.
And
so
you have
now,
to know your audience, right? So
right.
your audience you have to send the communication in a style and in a way that is suitable for your audience, whether they're an extrovert and an introvert, or reader or a listener, whatever it is.
Okay. All right. All points well taken. And we will now bring on Lorie Coulombe, CMO at Q4 Inc. Hello, Lorie. How are you and where are you?
Hi, Drew. I am doing well, and I'm in New York City too on this beautiful sunny but chilly day.
There you go. We could have put another mic here and had you there. Oh, well, we'll do that next time.
Next time.
So you've heard from Bill and Julie and now, and can you talk a little bit about your introversion levels and how they've shaped your career?
Sure. I'm going to repeat a bit of what both Bill and Julie said. I definitely am on the introversion scale. But I'm not shy, nor am I quiet. So, there's that side of me. But, I would say that, from early in my career, I recognized that I was more comfortable working within a team, with a group of people that I was comfortable with. I worked on a lot of initiatives within a small group, and understood that was where I found most of my success. But over time, and in fact, also with coaching, getting a coach at one point in time, and actually multiple times in my career, I recognized that if I wanted to move forward in my career path, I needed to adopt strategies to move out of my comfort zone. And so I was encouraged to join industry associations, attend conferences, and make time to build my network by identifying opportunities within my industry and within my cohort that maybe might have been smaller, like networking opportunities like breakfast roundtables or cocktails or thought leadership events where I could meet people in a smaller setting, and while also learning about a topic. So then taking that and doing something like what Julie said, leaving that event and then going and having some quiet time and sorting through like who I met, what did we talk about, and then what did I learn when I was at the event. So it was kind of a win-win for me.
A couple of notes I want to put punctuation points on, particularly for aspiring CMOs. You've heard this now a couple times. Coaches are really important, and it doesn't matter whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. You've got blind spots, and it's important that you be self-aware. And there's nothing like a good coach to get at that. And that's number one. Number two, you brought up conferences and how that's something that you had to force yourself to do. And we had a comment earlier from Lisa Kalfas, who is a coach, and what she mentioned is, if you go to a conference and you're solo, the icebreaking question is, what brings you here today? What brought you here today? And I thought that was great. I thought that was just such a great reminder. I just have to remember that. Maybe I'll have to put
Me
it
too.
Right. It's like, I better next time. You need to schedule it into the calendar that says, ask this question. So, okay. And then, so I heard also like working with small groups, and I'm guessing applying the listening skills that you have and are very comfortable with. How do you make sure that you get to decisions? and I ask this because there is that a mindset that perfect is the enemy of good enough, and that it can take too long to make a decision. And I'm just wondering if in your career on critical decisions where you just said, okay, I don't know everything, but I know enough, and how you've managed that.
Yeah, I would say that's exactly it. I think a lot of times I've gotten better in the companies I've worked at over the years to accept, progress over perfection, and understand, though, and this is part of me being the introvert side of me, thinking through all the pros and cons, right? But learning how to do it more quickly, and working with a team of people who maybe are more extroverted, or they bring their expertise to the table, and then we can more quickly analyze and identify where we want to move forward and make that decision. So in this world, and I've been in corporate America for 30 years, and we only are moving faster and faster. So bringing a team together or a small group together to really think through everything quickly and move forward.
Progress over perfection. And I love that. And as you were talking, a couple of things occurred to me that are somewhat related to this, which is on the entrepreneur side, many entrepreneurs talk about how many times other folks said this won't work, who had thought it through, this won't work and this won't work. And in fact, I think it was Ted Turner who said, the more people told me that this wouldn't work, the stronger I felt about it. So I think that this notion of introversion is really important if you're an extrovert to have an introvert on your team. Similarly, I think if you're an introvert, it's important to have the opposite. Do you consciously think about that as you're building your team, making sure that you have this balance?
Yes, absolutely. I think that I'm always looking for the brightest people with the functional expertise I need. But one thing I think about being an introvert is that over time, it's also helped me really evaluate people, not only listen to how they respond to questions when I'm interviewing them, but also look at their communication styles, right? And then thinking about that and thinking about how they would fit within my team, but also within the company culture. Because you can't have, a full team of just people who are all extroverts or all, ideators. You need people who have different skills and bring different ways of thinking to the group. And that only makes the team stronger. So I also think about the fact that talent development is really an ongoing process. So as I build a team, I also think about what are the ongoing ways that I can build time into my calendar to do, like Julie said, she does more one-on-ones. I'm definitely doing more one-on-ones with people. I want to get to know them and understand them. And I think it just makes the whole team stronger.
And what I'm inferring in these one-on-ones a little bit from you and from Julie is you're taking your own personal self-awareness and you're helping your team members become a little more self-aware. And it's sort of you can lean into their strengths, but at the same time, they need to know where the blind spots are, right?
Indeed. And even more so, I think Julie mentioned this, like being in a virtual environment, like the one-on-one time we do and we make the time for, really, I think the idea of giving not only them ongoing feedback and identifying their blind spots, but also identifying their wins and where they've done a really good job. And unfortunately or fortunately, like most of the time now, that's all done on Zoom. So.
Or a restream like we are here, except we're live. So I don't think we're doing any one-on-ones live. All right. Well, thank you for that, Lorie. We're going to come back to you and Bill and Julie in a second. But for the moment, I get to solo plug CMO Huddles. We launched CMO Huddles in 2020, and it's a close-knit community of over 300 highly effective B2B marketing leaders who share, care, and dare each other to greatness. Given the extraordinary time constraints on CMOs these days, and it seems to be getting even tighter, everything about CMO Huddles is designed to help leaders save time and empower them to make faster, better decisions. If you're a senior B2B marketer, extroverted or introverted, and need a shortcut to B2B greatness, take a second to sign up for our free starter program at cmohuddles.com. Okay, let's bring back Julie, Bill, and Lorie. All of you are incredibly busy marketing leaders, yet you're making time for CMO Huddles, and I'm so grateful to you that you do that. Maybe I wonder if you would like to share maybe in a specific example of how CMO Huddles has helped you save time, for example, or just inspired you in some way or another.
I'll go if you don't mind. So we've been working on a brand revitalization program at our company, and one of the things that's great, two very specific things. One is the standing on the shoulder of giants. So we've got this community of practitioners who have been where I am, maybe a lot of wisdom to share. So I've really involved digging in and understanding from the perspectives of others. And the other, Drew, is you and I have spent one-on-one time. It's kind of like you can convince yourself you're in the right direction, but unless you actually have someone, who's sort of, out of the picture to kind of load test some of your thinking, I think that value of our one-on-one time has been very, very good for our program. So appreciate that.
Oh, I love it. It's amazing. So Julie, you were going to say something.
Well, I like to think of CMO Huddles as like my personal board of advisors for Julie Kaplan Inc. Like I get immediate advice about problems I'm facing today. I also get insight into problems I'm facing tomorrow. So I'm better prepared to deal with them when they occur.
I love it. Your personal board of advisors. Awesome. Okay, Lorie.
Yeah, similar. I think back to earlier this year when I first joined, and just having a group of peers to bounce ideas off of, or to reach out to with questions, or asking them how they may have handled something. And I'm speaking specifically, Drew, when I first joined and we were relaunching our brand, and you and the community connected me with someone in the community who had been through 2 or 3 rebrands and category launches, and just the conversations I was able to have with them were so beneficial to me, and also gave me ideas and views and things to think about going forward in terms of expanding brand identity and awareness. So I think leveraging the network within CMO Huddles has been a huge benefit for me.
I love it. And I'm thinking about it. It's funny because what we kind of do is break the ice at the conference that you all want to go to, which is a bunch of CMOs who have that thing of, we're just going to break that ice for you and do those introductions. So anyway, if you're a B2B CMO who can share, care, and dare with the best of them, do yourself a favor and check out CMOhuddles.com. Okay, here we are. We're back. I'm curious now, knowing that we're introverts, you all collectively are introverts, how you've developed specific strategies to ensure that your voice is heard in executive meetings, even if you're not the loudest one in the room. And maybe we'll start with Lorie on that.
Sure. So some things I do is I come into every executive meeting prepared. I actually take time to prep. I find that writing down just my thoughts on the various topics of that will be on the agenda help me think about what I want to say, so I'm actually more comfortable speaking. I also am comfortable with sitting back and also actively listening. So back to something Bill said about adding more value, like I find by listening, I may pick up on something and then bring my own perspective as CMO to the conversation. And just lastly, at Q4, we're very much a culture of respectful discussion and debate. So we actually, in meetings, raise our hands, especially those of us who are on camera virtually and are not sitting in the room with the rest of the group. So I raise my hand and I am heard.
I love it. Bill, what about you in your getting your voice heard in executive meetings?
Yeah, I say there are probably 2 things. One is you've got to really be kind of more business minded than functional minded when you're in an executive setting, right? So putting that perspective of what the business is trying to achieve is an absolutely critical part of how you're going to create value, in addition to your functional expertise, but more importantly, kind of you're a steward of the business. I'd say the other thing, and this is a little bit of my poet, if you can't disarm with charm, then, come armed with the data.
I love it. We're going to have to write some music to that. So I just want to make just a big punctuation point, because I think this idea is in this framework is bigger than any extrovert or introvert conversation, which is the CMO that speaks about the business and not about marketing is on their way to being respected as a leader of the organization, not as a marketer. And I want to say that, put that up there in stone, right with Bill's rhyming scheme. Okay, Julie, how about you?
So I wonder if we did a word cloud on this session and we'd find the word prepared and quiet came up a lot, but in preparation for, executive meetings, usually I do a lot of pre-work. So, and in the form of one-on-ones, and I have discussions to seek understanding. So before I get in the room, I have a good bead on what people are concerned about, what pushback I might get, and I can speak to those topics proactively, much more likely to be heard, even if I say less.
It's so much like an interview to sell before the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Which is such a smart thing to go. The other thing that I was thinking about, Julie, that you could do today that you couldn't have done a year and a half ago, which is you can go into a chat GPT and say, hey, I'm about to have a conversation with our CFO about this. What are the 5 questions they're going to ask me? You just, and even if they're not exactly the ones it will stimulate some thinking. So I love that. Okay. So Lorie and I talked a little bit about hiring and mentorship and so forth. And this feels like an area where it should be a great strength for you all. And you've talked about it. And Bill, talk about this in terms of how you approach hiring and building a team and building a balanced team.
Well, so one, I think that balance is critical. And I can't remember, I think it was Lorie who said that, you've got to really develop a more heterogeneous team that's both skill based and personality variable based, because a lot of what happens with team dynamics are people building upon each other's strengths, especially if they operate with sort of that fabric of respect sitting behind them. So when we hire, we definitely kind of take a look for what are the right skills, but we're also trying to figure out what are the right cultural fits that are both company culture values as well as kind of our team values. And so that's a critical point of how we actually get, I think, the right hiring done. But then I think it's, you're onboarding people, you're really helping to mentor them through both understanding what the business expects of them and kind of how they can contribute. But you're also kind of, I think, in the background, really sort of trying to work on that cultural dynamic, right? How do you kind of get people to really become part of the fabric of the organization and recognize that with respect and with the ability to kind of work with different styles, you can create a lot of different kinds of wins.
Lorie or Julie, did you want to weigh in on that, or we'll keep moving?
I think you nailed it.
Okay, perfect. I did too. So I did some homework. I did preparation, just like you all talk about for your board meeting. This is a board meeting, if you will, of 3 CMOs. And the strengths that were listed that sort of consistently came up is being a deep relationship builder, having strong listening skills, calm under pressure. And I'm just curious about that one. Yeah, because I learned through a series of crises to sort of to be prepared to see, okay, opportunity is knocking, but I had to go through that and kind of panic a number of times before I was able to train myself. It's like when you go to put a flame out on a mat, on a candle, you just have to train yourself that if it takes a second, it's not going to hurt. But I'm curious, do you feel like as an introvert, they calm under pressure? And can you think of a circumstance where that's actually true for you, Julie or Lorie?
I mean, I don't know about you, Lorie, but I don't get worked up very easily, at least externally. There's a lot going on, behind the eyeballs. But externally, I think what happens is all the gears working in the brain just sort of jam up the gears that make your mouth move. And there's some advantages to that. And it appears as if you're calm.
I see. The turbulence is underneath, but on the surface, you're calm.
I'm exactly the same way.
Yeah.
On the surface, I'm very calm. In fact, I'm smiling. Can be kind of jokey, disarm with humor, but inside everything's churning, and I'm thinking, okay, I keep smiling and stay cool.
And that gives some people, I mean, I've had people say to me, thank you, because I probably would have freaked out more if you were freaking out too, like, so people need to see somebody who's just going to figure it out, even if you don't know how you're going to figure it out. That's just
right. You're just not going to panic or show panic in a tough situation. Bill,
you can be authentic and tell them you're concerned. You need to be authentic and tell them you're worried or tell them the emotions you're having, but that doesn't need to translate to, full on panic mode.
Oh my God.
Right.
Right. Probably not a good idea. But Bill, I mean, do you feel calm under pressure?
I feel most of the time, although I will say I've been told I don't have a poker face. So if I am in serious disagreement with something that's going on, I'll kind of really hold my tongue, but people can see the smoke coming out of my ears.
Yeah. Okay. And I think it's different. I think that's a little bit different than being calm under pressure. But that is just a tremendous asset, I think, because there are times where, stuff happens and you just have to, if you want to deal with that stuff, you're going to have to calm and be able to allow your brain to, the gears to work, and panic sets in and you can't. Okay. Now I'm going to share the list of sort of the top 5 weaknesses. We've covered one, which is less inclined to network. Number 2 is the risk of under communicating. And I thought that's interesting because if you're not talking as much, in theory, I guess you're under communicating. Do you think about, does that resonate with you at all? And don't under communicate your response to this.
Well, I found that the less I say, the smarter I appear.
Yeah. Okay. That part I get, pithy and I get it. So, although it doesn't apply to me because I talk so much, but let's just talk about that risk. You've said your piece, and yet the group isn't sold. So you're not finished yet, even though you feel like you are. I'm just, again, help me here. I can get rid of this one if we really think isn't. Go ahead, Bill.
I've actually got an example. Like about 7 years ago when I joined the company that I'm in, I started as a outsider in an organization I was unfamiliar with. And I think my introverted tendencies made me more prone to under communicate. So I was listening a lot. I was asking a lot of questions, and I was processing a lot of information and making recommendations in my head that were not coming out. And the thought process behind them was not coming out. So I think people started to kind of invent their own narrative about what is this guy? He's, probably spending a little too much time, ruminating, and people invent their own narrative. And so I think unnecessary anxiety, I think, even some recovery, right? Some recovery of saying, who is this person, and not showing what I would say was an appropriate amount of self-awareness then. So I think that's one of those things that you kind of learn through. And I'm like, now share what your thinking is, because A, you don't want to alienate people. And B, you want to get more input, right? And then I think, you want to try to use it as an opportunity to teach and grow skills that, other leaders on the team are going to look to you, and developing leaders in particular, for what are ways to think about this that I haven't thought about. So keeping it all in your head, probably not a good idea.
Yeah. And I think, and again, this is a difference between being a CMO and being a CEO. I think as the CMO, you know, a CEO could be an introvert and just keep listening and listening and make decisions quietly. And that was sort of in the Good to Great. They talked about that sort of invisible hand of the CEO. I think the CMO is a role where you're selling brand, you're selling some ethereal stuff. You have to, in some cases, maybe you have to over communicate. So I just wonder, so this is something that you three have to sort of remind yourself of.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay. So we're balancing this. Another interesting thing on the list of potential weaknesses is a reluctance to self-promote.
I would
go for it.
Yeah, I would say for me, I definitely, that one sits, I definitely have this reluctance over time. I think the work should speak for itself, or I am very focused on promoting people on my team and the work they do, and not then when people say, well, want to recognize me as the CMO and the leader, I tend to disarm that compliment. That's my nature.
You don't want to take the credit, which is charming. But I guess there's a point where you could be underselling, if you will, both yourself and potentially the role of marketing.
Completely. And one thing I've been working on actually is in this area and even with my team, is internally promoting what marketing is doing. We are very active on Slack, but we have not done a great job of promoting the work that we're doing for our clients and with our brand within the company. So it's something actually, Drew, I'm working on every day.
I love that. Julie or Bill, in terms of this reluctance to self-promote?
Yeah, I would say interesting. I think picking up on Lorie's thread is that separate yourself from the promotion of what's going on that's good that marketing is doing. And I would say that very proud of my team in particular. We have kind of these things called joint team meetings, or kind of 2-hour monthly. Every 6 weeks or so, we're getting together to hear what's going on across the company. And they have done an amazing job sort of promoting a lot of the great work we do in terms of our customer stories and the very different things that we're doing to kind of elevate and raise the brand. So it doesn't so much come down to me. It comes to me enabling or empowering them to kind of go share the good news.
Right. So you're aware of the tendency, and get your team to do it. And also, by the way, that's one of the things that we do at CMO Huddles. And of course, just today we launched our top B2B marketing influencers, because you wouldn't have done it, but we did it, and you three are on that list. We also have this show to help you sort of in some ways get your voice out there, and your important voice, even though you would rather give someone else credit for it. So as we think about this, there's one other thing that was on this list that I was questioning, which is a hesitancy to delegate. And that was linked to introversion. And I couldn't really wrap my mind around it, but does that make any sense to you? Does that resonate, or we can just move on? No.
I don't think so. I mean, I'm guessing everyone has teams and jobs that are so large that if you don't delegate, you die. So
survival.
Agreed.
So do you think, and then let's think about this introversion in connection to the content, the storytelling, the brand messaging at all, knowing yourself and the way you might, your aversion to self-promotion. How do you sort of make sure that doesn't get in the way of, hey, we got to beat the drum for the brand? Julie?
One of the topics that came up earlier was having, different types of people on the team. This is where you tap into their skills and strengths and ask them to shine. Encourage the promotion of the team, encourage promotion internally, encourage it externally. And you tap into those people who love that type of work. So I don't have to love it. I just have to have someone on the team who does.
So a couple of things come to mind as we sort of wrap up this conversation is that you may not want praise, you may be embarrassed by praise, but you and your team, you need to remind yourself that your team might need it,
Sure.
and marketing, the department, definitely needs it as part
Mhm.
of marketing is something that everybody in the organization sort of can be show pride about and demonstrate as, almost going back to their willingness to promote the brand. So yeah, it's a tendency there where you really got to fight it. Okay, we're at this point in the show where we would say, what would Ben Franklin say? And here's a funny thing about this. Even though he's one of the most famous and was certainly the most famous American, he would be what is considered an introvert. And interestingly, because he was a guy who hated public speaking, he was a terrible public speaker. You wouldn't believe it. Brilliant writer, brilliant thinker, deep thinker, great conversational, and made deep friends, but not a great public speaker. And in fact, and that was kind of a disappointment to a lot of folks who had heard about the great Ben Franklin. Is like he mumbled in public speaking. So what would he say? Speak little, do much, which is kind of what he did a lot in his life. So, all right. Final words of wisdom for other introverted leaders or professionals who aspire to reach leadership positions in the B2B space. And we'll do this with Lorie first.
Okay, I would say practice and prepare and really do things out of your comfort zone. It will get easier over time.
And the point about getting out of your comfort zone is important. And again, I don't think it matters whether you're an extrovert or introvert. What we're talking about is being self-aware so that you do that. And then the point about preparing, which we've sort of, an extrovert might want to wing it. Nah, there's very few situations where that's a good idea. All right, let's see. Julie.
I would say, and I don't know if this is specific to introverts, but I would say, generally speaking, own who you are and find a way to make whatever your natural traits are advantageous to you and your team and to your career.
Thank you for sharing that and stating that, because I know from the little bit of Myers-Briggs work that I've done that you can go to any quadrant and you can find a president of the United States, a leader of an organization. So they just knew how to be their best self. And that's so key. Okay, Bill Strawderman.
I would just say, I think curiosity is an advantage. And, as long as you're curious, not only about the what, meaning the data and some of the facts, right, but the who, you've got to challenge yourself to kind of blend both and use that curiosity to drive you forward. I found kind of the whole idea of, if you are not willing to develop yourself, you won't develop. So, be curious about that as well.
And it's a life gift, being curious, right? Because if you have the ability to ask others and get excited about what they're sharing, life is never going to be boring, right? Because you're going to keep learning and exploring. So, all right. Well, with that, hopefully you all are continuing to be curious. So thank you, Bill, Julie, Lorie, you're all amazing sports. Thank you, audience, for staying with us. Please join us in 2 weeks when we'll be talking about aligning marketing during transformation with Carrie Bainbridge, Noreen Galstian, and Khaled El Khatib. Cue the music. CMO Huddles Studio is produced by Melissa Caffrey. Our production assistant is Laura Parkin. If you'd like to learn more about CMO Huddles, please visit cmohuddles.com. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, and until next time, keep on sharing, caring, and daring each other to